The stars looked peaceful from the observation deck of Nexus Prime, the massive space station that served as the heart of galactic power. Ambassador Zexathara stretched his long blue arms and gazed out at the swirling colors of the nearby nebula. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had ruled over countless worlds and species with absolute authority. Peace had been maintained through fear and overwhelming force. Any species that dared to challenge the Council found themselves facing fleets so powerful that resistance was pointless. Zexthara belonged to the Vorthan Empire, one of the 7 founding races of the Council. The Vorthons were tall, elegant beings with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved with fluid grace. They had been among the first to develop faster-than-light travel and had spent millennia conquering weaker species. Their philosophy was simple: the strong ruled and the weak served. This natural order had brought stability to the galaxy, even if that stability came at the cost of freedom for billions of beings. The council chamber buzzed with quiet activity as representatives from various species went about their daily business. The insect-like Zephyrians clicked and chirped in their corner, processing data from surveillance networks that monitored every corner of council space. The energy beings known as luminals flickered and pulsed as they calculated tribute quotas and shipping schedules. Everything ran with mechanical precision, as it had for centuries. In the outer regions of the galaxy, far beyond the Council's immediate attention, a small human ship drifted through space. The UES Defiance was not much to look at compared to the gleaming vessels of the Council fleets. Its hull bore scars from countless asteroid impacts and emergency repairs. The ship had been built from salvaged alien technology that humans had found drifting in the void, patched together with Earth-made components and a lot of hope. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his command chair, studying the star charts on his main screen. He was a tall man with graying hair and tired eyes that had seen too much in his 45 years. Morrison had served in Earth's space navy since humanity first achieved faster-than-light travel just 20 years ago. The human race was still new to space travel, and their ships were crude compared to what other species had developed over thousands of years. Lieutenant Amy Roberts worked at her station nearby, monitoring communications from across the sector. She was young and eager, with short brown hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. Roberts had joined the crew 6 months ago, fresh from the Earth Naval Academy, and she brought an energy to the ship that Morrison appreciated. Her job was to track alien signals and try to make sense of the various languages and codes that filled space. Chief Engineer Pete Collins emerged from the engine room, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. Collins was a short, stocky man who could make any piece of technology work, no matter how damaged or incompatible it might be. He had spent years learning how alien systems functioned, often through dangerous trial and error. The Defiance stayed in space largely because of his skill and determination. The crew of 12 humans aboard the Defiance represented the best that Earth had to offer. They were explorers and soldiers, scientists and engineers, all united by a desire to see what lay beyond their home system. Most other species would have considered them primitives, barbarians who had barely learned to travel between stars. The humans did not care what others thought. They had work to do. Morrison had been monitoring strange signals for the past 3 days. The messages were coming from a system about 2 light-years away, and they sounded desperate. The Universal translator that Collins had built from alien components could only make out fragments, but the tone was clear. Someone was in trouble and calling for help. Roberts looked up from her console with excitement in her voice. "Captain, I'm getting clearer signals now. It's definitely a distress call. Multiple sources, all saying the same thing. They're under attack and requesting immediate assistance." Morrison frowned as he considered their options. The Defiance was alone in this sector, far from any Earth ships or bases. Their mission was supposed to be peaceful exploration, mapping new systems and studying alien cultures from a safe distance. Getting involved in someone else's war was not part of their orders. Collins joined the conversation, his expression serious. "Captain, those signals are coming from Kepler 442b. According to our star charts, that's a mining colony belonging to something called the Altarian Federation. Never heard of them before, but they're clearly not having a good day." The distress signals continued to pour in, each one more desperate than the last. Morrison could hear the fear in the alien voices, even through the electronic translation. Children were crying in the background. People were screaming orders. Explosions echoed through the transmissions. Whatever was happening at Kepler 442b, it was getting worse by the minute. Roberts pulled up more information on her screens. "Sir, I'm detecting at least 30 ships in that system. Most of them don't match any known friendly configurations. The colonists are calling them Ravagers. Sounds like they're some kind of raiding force." Morrison had heard rumors about the Ravagers during his travels. They were a nomadic species that attacked isolated colonies, stealing resources and enslaving survivors. Most civilized species considered them a persistent nuisance rather than a serious threat. The Galactic Council had been hunting them for decades without much success. The captain stood up and walked to the main view screen, staring out at the stars. Somewhere in that direction, people were dying, while he sat safely in his ship. It went against everything he believed in to ignore their pleas for help. Morrison had sworn an oath to protect innocent life wherever he found it, even if those lives belonged to alien species he had never encountered before. Collins spoke quietly from behind him. "Captain, our orders are pretty clear. We're supposed to observe and report, not get involved in local conflicts. Earth Command was very specific about that." Morrison nodded slowly, still staring at the stars. He understood the reasoning behind those orders. Humanity was new to galactic politics and could not afford to make enemies. One small ship could not make much difference against a fleet of raiders anyway. The smart thing to do would be to record the signals and report them when they returned to Earth space. But Jake Morrison had not become a starship captain by always doing the smart thing. Morrison turned away from the view screen and faced his crew. His decision was made, even though he knew it might doom them all. "Set course for Kepler 442b, maximum speed. We're going to help those people." Roberts looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Sir, are you sure about this? We don't know anything about these Altarians or what we're flying into." Collins shook his head and muttered under his breath. 30 enemy ships against one beat-up human vessel. This is going to be interesting." The Defiance jumped to faster than light speed, its hybrid engines straining under the demand for maximum power. Collins had built those engines himself from salvaged alien components and human ingenuity. They were not pretty, but they worked. The ship could not match the speed or elegance of Council vessels, but it could get where it needed to go. During the 2-day journey to Kepler 442b, Morrison studied everything his crew could find about the Altarian Federation. They were a peaceful species that had joined the Galactic Council centuries ago. Their role was to mine rare minerals from dangerous systems that other species avoided. In exchange for this service, the Council protected their colonies from raiders and pirates. The protection had clearly failed this time. Roberts monitored the communications from the colony as they traveled, and the situation was getting worse with each passing hour. The Ravagers had landed ground forces and were systematically destroying everything they could not steal. Thousands of civilian workers were trapped in underground shelters, waiting for help that might never come. When the Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light speed at the edge of the Kepler system, Morrison got his first look at what they were facing. 37 Ravager ships surrounded the mining colony like vultures around a corpse. The enemy vessels were dark and angular, bristling with weapons that could tear apart anything in their path. Roberts ran a tactical scan and reported her findings. "Captain, those ships are heavily armed and shielded. Each one is about twice our size. Their technology appears to be several generations ahead of ours." Collins joined them on the bridge, carrying a toolkit and wearing his most determined expression. I've been working on some modifications to our weapon systems. Nothing fancy, but it might give us an edge. The aliens won't be expecting human tactics." Morrison opened a communication channel to the colony. A six-limbed alien appeared on the screen, its face showing terror and exhaustion. This was Quelm, the colony administrator, who had been coordinating the defense of his people for the past 3 days. "Unknown vessel, you must leave immediately," Quelm said through the universal translator. "The Ravagers will destroy you without hesitation. Our own council fleet cannot arrive for another 72 hours. Morrison looked directly into the alien's multiple eyes. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We're here to help. Can you tell me about your defensive capabilities?" Quelm stared at the screen in disbelief. "You are only one ship against their entire fleet. This is madness. You will die for nothing." "Maybe," Morrison replied calmly. "But we're not leaving. Tell me about your defenses." The colony had some orbital weapon platforms, but most had been destroyed in the initial attack. The mining complex itself was built into an asteroid, with thick armor that could withstand bombardment. For a while, several thousand civilians were hiding in the deepest tunnels, protected by emergency shields that were already beginning to fail. Morrison studied the tactical display and began forming a plan. The Ravager ships were arranged in a loose formation around the colony, taking turns to pound its defenses while others collected salvage from destroyed structures. They were confident and relaxed, treating this like a routine operation. That confidence would be their weakness. Roberts tracked the enemy movement patterns while Collins prepared their weapon systems for combat. The Defiance carried 6 missile tubes and 2 energy cannons, all modified with human innovations that the aliens had never encountered before. It was not much firepower compared to a Council warship, but it would have to do. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced, over the ship's communication system. "We are about to engage a superior enemy force in defense of innocent civilians. I won't lie to you about our chances, but I'd rather die fighting than live knowing we could have made a difference and chose not to." The crew responded with grim determination. Medical Officer Lisa Grant prepared the sickbay for casualties while securing all loose equipment. Navigator Danny Price plotted evasive courses and escape routes. Every person on the ship understood that they were probably about to die, but none of them suggested retreat. Morrison gave the order to attack. The Defiance accelerated toward the nearest group of Ravager ships, its engines pushed beyond safe limits by Collins's modifications. The human vessel was small and fast compared to the enemy ships, allowing it to close distance before they could react effectively. The first Ravager ship exploded in a brilliant flash as human missiles found their target. The Ravagers had been expecting another mining ship or perhaps a light patrol vessel. They were not prepared for weapons that used human military doctrine developed through centuries of warfare on Earth. Roberts targeted the second ship while Morrison threw the Defiance into a spinning dive that confused the enemy targeting systems. Human pilots trained differently than aliens, using instincts and reflexes that had been honed through countless aerial combats in Earth's atmosphere. The artificial gravity systems of the Defiance could not keep up with Morrison's aggressive maneuvers, but the crew held on and kept fighting. The second Ravager ship lost its main engines and began drifting helplessly. Collins had loaded their missiles with specialized warheads designed to disrupt alien power systems. The technology was crude but effective, turning each hit into a system-wide failure that left enemy ships dead in space. By now, the entire Ravager fleet was converging on the human ship. Plasma bolts and energy beams filled space around the Defiance as Morrison pushed his vessel through impossible maneuvers. The ship's armor began to fail under the intense bombardment, but the crew kept fighting. Grant reported from sickbay that half the crew was injured, but everyone remained at their posts. Price's navigation console exploded in sparks, burning his hands, but he continued to plot courses using backup systems. The Defiance was dying, but it was taking enemies with it. Morrison rammed the third Ravager ship when his weapons ran out of ammunition. The impact destroyed both vessels, but Collins had rigged the human ship's reactor to overload on command. The explosion took out 2 more enemy ships and damaged several others. In the end, the Defiance drifted powerless and broken, but 26 Ravager ships had been destroyed or disabled. The surviving enemy vessels fled rather than face whatever other surprises the humans might have prepared. When the Council fleet finally arrived, they found the colony intact and the humans barely alive in their shattered ship. The news of what happened at Kepler 442b spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. In the Grand Chamber of Nexus Prime, representatives from 7 major species gathered to discuss these strange humans who had accomplished what their own fleets struggled to achieve. The mood in the chamber was tense and uncertain. High Arbiter Kol Shara of the Crystalline Dominion stood at the center of the circular room, her translucent body flickering with nervous energy. The crystalline beings were among the oldest members of the Council, and their long experience had taught them to recognize potential threats before they became dangerous. What she had learned about humans worried her greatly. 26 Ravager vessels destroyed or disabled by a single primitive ship, she announced to the assembled delegates. This should be impossible according to all our tactical models and combat simulations. Commander Vex of the Zephyrian Hive clicked his mandibles in agitation. The insect-like beings served as the Council's intelligence network, and their surveillance systems monitored every corner of known space. They had been tracking the Ravager fleet for months without being able to predict or prevent their attack. On the mining colony, our analysis indicates that these humans employed tactics we have never encountered, Vex reported through his artificial translator. They used ramming attacks, suicide runs, and weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. Most significantly, they showed complete disregard for their own survival in pursuit of their objectives. Ambassador Zexathara listened to the reports with growing unease. His own people, the Vorthons, had built their empire through careful calculation and overwhelming force. They never engaged in battles unless victory was guaranteed. The idea of fighting against impossible odds was alien to their nature. The Luminals, beings of pure energy who existed within specially designed containment suits, provided computational analysis of the battle. Their spokesperson, a flickering form known as Bright Thought Ascending, shared their conclusions with the Assembly. Probability calculations show that the human victory was statistically impossible, the energy being reported. However, our models were based on rational behavior patterns. These humans acted in ways that our logic systems cannot predict or understand. While the Council debated, Captain Morrison and the surviving members of his crew were recovering in the medical facilities aboard the Council rescue fleet. The humans had been pulled from their dying ship and given the best treatment available, though the aliens were not sure why they bothered. Most species would have abandoned such a hopeless mission long before it reached its conclusion. Morrison sat in his hospital bed, his body covered with bandages and medical sensors that monitored his vital signs. Lieutenant Roberts was in the bed next to him, her left arm in a regeneration chamber that slowly repaired the damage from a plasma burn. Chief Engineer Collins had suffered the worst injuries when the ship's reactor overloaded, but he was conscious and already asking questions about alien medical technology. Admiral Kex Mara of the Council Defense Fleet visited the human patients, personally. The tall, green-skinned Altarian was curious about these strange beings who had saved his people's colony. He had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries, but he had never seen anything like the battle at Kepler 442b. "Your actions were highly irregular," the Admiral told Morrison through a translation device. "Council military doctrine emphasizes careful planning and overwhelming superiority. Victory through sacrifice is considered wasteful and inefficient." Morrison looked up at the alien officer with tired eyes. "We didn't plan to die, Admiral. We planned to win. Sometimes those are the same thing." The admiral studied the human captain for a long moment. Your species is very different from ours. We have eliminated warfare from our societies through logical advancement and social evolution. Violence is considered a primitive response to conflict. Maybe that's your problem, Roberts interjected from her bed. You've forgotten how to fight. For something worth dying for. Collins managed a weak laugh from his medical apparatus. These ravagers have been raiding your colonies for decades, right? How's that working out for you? The questions made Admiral Kexmara uncomfortable. The ravager problem had indeed persisted despite numerous council expeditions and diplomatic efforts. Their raids were considered a minor irritation rather than a serious threat, but the damage they caused was significant over time. Within days, Morrison and his crew were summoned to appear before the full Galactic Council. The humans were still recovering from their injuries, but the Council would not wait. They needed to understand what these newcomers represented and how to deal with them. The council chamber was an impressive sight, with delegates from dozens of species arranged in concentric circles around a central platform. Morrison stood in the middle of this assembly, wearing a simple Earth uniform that looked crude compared to the elaborate clothing and equipment of the alien representatives. Hi. Arbiter Kolshara addressed the human captain directly. Your species was unknown to us until recently. Your technology is primitive and your ships are inferior to our standards. Yet you accomplished what our fleets have failed to achieve. Explain this contradiction. Morrison looked around at the assembled aliens, taking in their confident expressions and superior attitudes. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years, and they clearly expected him to be impressed by their power and wisdom. You want to know how we won? Morrison asked. You've grown soft. You've forgotten what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. We haven't. The statement caused an uproar among the delegates. Several species began talking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of indignant responses. The Vorthans were particularly offended since their empire had been built on military conquest. Commander Vex stepped forward, his insect features twisted with anger. Your species shows all the signs of primitive aggression that civilized beings have evolved beyond. You are dangerous and unpredictable. Dangerous to who? Morrison replied calmly. We saved an entire colony of your people. The only ones who got hurt were the raiders trying to kill innocent civilians. High Arbiter Kolshara raised her hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, she made the council's position clear. Your species shows potential, but also great risk. We offer you membership in the Galactic Council, where you can learn proper behavior and contribute to galactic peace. Morrison understood what she was really saying. Join us or be destroyed. It was the same choice the Council had given every species they encountered. Submit to their authority or face their combined fleets. Thank you for the offer, Morrison said politely. But humanity will make its own way among the stars. We don't need anyone's permission to exist. The silence that followed was heavy with threat. No species had ever refused council membership and survived the consequences. The assembled delegates waited to see how their leaders would respond to this unprecedented challenge. Morrison continued speaking, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. We're not looking for a fight with anyone, but we won't bow down to bullies, no matter how powerful they think they are. What the Council did not know was that every word of this conversation was being transmitted back to Earth through quantum communication systems that Collins had installed in secret. Admiral Kate Henderson stood before the emergency session of the United Earth Government in Geneva, her uniform crisp and her expression grim. The quantum transmission from Captain Morrison had arrived 3 days ago, and the implications were staggering. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they had already made enemies of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Ladies and gentlemen, Henderson began, addressing the packed auditorium filled with world leaders and military officials. 6 months ago, we learned that the galaxy is ruled by an alliance called the Galactic Council. 3 days ago, they gave us an ultimatum. Submit to their authority or be destroyed. The room erupted in angry voices as delegates from every nation demanded answers. How had humanity stumbled into an interstellar war? What hope did Earth have against an enemy with thousands of years of technological advancement? Why had they not been consulted before Captain Morrison made his fateful decision? Henderson waited for the noise to subside before continuing. The Council has given us 60 days to surrender unconditionally. Their fleets are already moving toward our solar system. But I didn't call this meeting to discuss surrender terms. President Maria Santos of the United States leaned forward in her chair. Admiral, what exactly are you proposing? War, Henderson replied without hesitation. Total war against an enemy that considers us primitive barbarians. They expect us to roll over and submit like every other species they've encountered. I think it's time to show them what humans do when someone threatens our freedom. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Some delegates argued for negotiation and compromise. Others insisted that resistance was suicide against such overwhelming odds. But gradually, a consensus emerged. Humanity had not struggled for millennia to achieve independence and democracy, just to hand it over to alien overlords. The vote was unanimous. Earth would fight. What followed was the greatest mobilization in human history. Every factory, every shipyard, every research facility was converted to military production. The same industrial capacity that had lifted humanity from poverty and ignorance now turned toward creating instruments of war. Dr. Lisa Park led the team that reverse-engineered alien technology from the wreckage of the Defiance. The human ship had been destroyed, but its computers contained detailed scans of Ravager vessels and Council rescue ships. Within weeks, Earth's engineers were producing weapons and shields that could challenge alien superiority. Colonel Danny Price commanded the New Earth Defense Force, drawing on military expertise from every nation and conflict in human history. The strategies that had won battles from ancient Rome to modern conflicts were adapted for space warfare. Human tactics that had never been seen by alien eyes were refined and perfected. The first ships of the New Earth fleet launched 4 months after the Council ultimatum. They bore names like UES Vengeance, UES Retribution, and UES Freedom. Each vessel was a fusion of human engineering and alien technology, designed for one purpose: killing enemies that threatened human liberty. Captain Morrison, recovered from his injuries and promoted to Commodore, took command of the lead squadron. His flagship was the UES Defiance II, built to honor the ship that had started the war. Standing beside him on the bridge were Roberts and Collins, both bearing scars from their first encounter with galactic politics. The Council had expected Earth's surrender by now. Instead, their scout ships reported massive human fleet movements and military preparations that defied all predictions. High Arbiter Kolshara convened an emergency session to address this unexpected development. How is this possible? She demanded of her intelligence advisors. Our projections indicated that a primitive species would require centuries to develop effective space warfare capabilities. Commander Vex provided the disturbing answer. These humans appear to have been preparing for interstellar conflict throughout their entire evolutionary history. Their planet shows evidence of continuous warfare spanning thousands of years. They possess tactical knowledge that we eliminated from our own societies eons ago. The first major battle occurred at Proxima Centauri, where a Council enforcement fleet waited to escort Earth's surrender delegation. Instead, they found themselves facing 50 human warships that fought like nothing in their experience. Colonel Danny Price led the human attack from his command ship UES Fury. The battle plan was simple and brutal: destroy the enemy completely and send a message to the rest of the galaxy. There would be no prisoners, no negotiations, and no mercy for those who threatened human freedom. The Council ships were larger and more advanced, but they were crewed by beings who had never experienced real combat. Their weapons were designed for intimidation rather than warfare. Their tactics were based on overwhelming technological superiority rather than military skill. The humans attacked in coordinated groups, using formations developed in Earth's naval battles. They employed electronic warfare to blind enemy sensors, then closed to point-blank range where their crude but effective weapons could penetrate alien shields. Most shocking of all was their willingness to sacrifice themselves for victory. Captain. Lisa Park demonstrated this when her ship's reactor was damaged during the battle. Rather than retreat to safety, she ordered a ramming course toward the Council flagship. Her final transmission echoed across both fleets. For Earth and freedom, the UES Fury's reactor overload took out 3 Council ships and damaged 2 others. The explosion lit up space like a miniature star, visible to both sides as a testament to human determination. Captain Park became the first hero of the human resistance, though she would not be the last. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with complete human victory. Not a single Council ship survived to carry word of the defeat back to their superiors. The humans had proven that alien technology could be overcome by superior tactics and unbreakable will. News of the Proxima victory spread through human space like wildfire. Every colony, every space station, every mining platform celebrated the triumph of human arms over alien oppression. Earth's population watched the battle recordings with pride and determination. They were not alone in the universe, but they were not helpless either. Admiral Henderson addressed the Earth Defense Council after reviewing the battle reports. The enemy expected us to surrender after seeing their superior technology. Instead, we've shown them that humans don't back down from bullies, no matter how big they are. The Council's response was swift and predictable. 3 massive fleets were dispatched to crush human resistance before it could spread to other species. They brought their most advanced ships and their most experienced commanders. The gloves were off, and the real war was about to begin. But humans had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. Hidden bases throughout the solar system housed weapons that no alien had ever imagined. Earth's children were ready to defend their home with everything they had. The second phase of the war would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or joined the countless others who had submitted to Council rule. Admiral Henderson stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching enemy fleets approach through the darkness of space. She smiled grimly and gave the order that would echo through galactic history. All ships, this is Admiral Henderson. The enemy has come to take our freedom. Show them what humans do to anyone who threatens our families. 2 years after first contact, the great chamber of the Galactic Council stood empty and silent. The marble floors that had once echoed with the voices of proud alien delegates now gathered dust in the artificial twilight. The 7 species that had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia had been brought to their knees by beings they had dismissed as primitive barbarians. Fleet Admiral Ryan Murphy walked slowly through the abandoned corridors of Nexus Prime, his boots clicking against the polished stone. The massive space station had surrendered without a fight when human fleets appeared at its borders. The Council's remaining forces had melted away, rather than face the warriors who had shattered their invincible reputation. Murphy paused before the great seal of the Galactic Council, carved into the wall by artists who had believed their civilization would last forever. The symbol showed 7 different species joined in eternal unity and peace. Now it was just another monument to fallen empires that had forgotten the price of freedom. The Admiral's flagship, UES Prometheus, hung in space outside the station like a symbol of humanity's unlikely victory. The ship bore the scars of dozens of battles, its hull patched and repaired so many times that little of the original metal remained. But it flew the flag of United Earth, and that flag had never been lowered in surrender. In the station's former council chamber, representatives from across the galaxy waited nervously for the human response to their formal surrender. The aliens, who had once commanded fleets and ruled star systems, now sat quietly in chairs designed for beings much larger than themselves. Their confidence had been shattered along with their military power. Ambassador Zexathera of the Vorthon Empire sat. In the front row, his forearms folded in a gesture of submission. The elegant blue-skinned being who had once lounged in luxury while tribute flowed from conquered worlds now wore simple clothing and bore the expression of someone who had seen his entire world-view collapse. Captain Morrison entered the chamber, wearing his dress uniform, the same simple Earth design that had looked so crude among alien finery 2 years earlier. Now it seemed dignified and practical compared to the elaborate costumes that the council delegates had abandoned in favor of plain robes. Morrison had been promoted several times during the war, but he still preferred to be called captain. Behind Morrison came the other heroes of humanity's victory. Admiral Henderson commanded respect from every species in the galaxy after her fleets had broken the council's military power. Colonel Price had become legendary for his tactical innovations that turned primitive human ships into weapons of mass destruction. Dr. Park, sister of the martyred Captain Lisa Park, had developed the technologies that made human victory possible. The surrender ceremony was simple and direct, lacking the elaborate rituals that had once marked council proceedings. The aliens had learned that humans preferred substance over show, results over ceremony. There was no point in maintaining pretenses that had been stripped away by 2 years of devastating warfare. High Arbiter Kolshara, her crystalline form, dim with defeat, read the terms of surrender in a voice that barely carried through the chamber. The Galactic Council would be dissolved immediately. All conquered species would be granted immediate independence. Council fleets would be decommissioned under human supervision. War criminals would face justice in courts established by their former victims. These terms are generous, considering the circumstances, Zexathara admitted through his translation device. The words came hard to a being who had spent centuries believing in Vorthon supremacy. We expected complete destruction after our forces were defeated. Morrison looked at the alien ambassador with eyes that had seen too much death and destruction. We didn't fight this war to become the new oppressors. We fought for the right of all species to determine their own future without interference from self-appointed rulers. Chief Administrator Carol Banks, Earth's new representative to galactic affairs, outlined humanity's vision for the post-war galaxy. The former United Nations Secretary General had been chosen for her diplomatic skills and her ability to work with different cultures and species. The Terran-allied Galactic Federation will replace the old council system, she explained to the assembled delegates. Membership will be voluntary, and all decisions will be made through democratic processes. No species will be forced to join, and none will be punished for choosing independence. The alien delegates struggled to understand this concept. Throughout their history, power had meant domination and control. The strong ruled the weak because that was the natural order of things. The idea that a victorious species would voluntarily limit its own authority was alien to their thinking. Commander Vex of the Zephyrian Hive clicked his mandibles in confusion. Your species possesses the military strength to rule the galaxy, as you see fit. Why do you choose to share power with those you have defeated? Morrison answered the question that had puzzled alien minds throughout the war. Because that's not the kind of people we want to be. We've seen what happens when one group decides they know what's best for everyone else. It never ends well. Across the galaxy, former council colonies celebrated their liberation with festivals and ceremonies that had been forbidden for centuries. The mining colony at Kepler 442b erected a monument to the crew of the original UES Defiance, honoring the humans who had died to save strangers they had never met. The Altarian Federation, grateful for their freedom, became one of the first species to join the new Galactic Alliance. Administrator Quelm, who had witnessed the first human intervention, served as an ambassador between his people and Earth. His testimony about human courage had helped convince other species that the new order was different from the old. Trade replaced tribute as the foundation of galactic economics. Species that had been forced to surrender their resources to council demands now sold their goods in free markets. Exploration resumed as former subject races sent their own ships to discover new worlds and opportunities. The changes were not always smooth. Some species struggled with the concept of self-governance after centuries of subjugation. Others tried to establish their own empires, only to find human fleets waiting to remind them of the new rules. Freedom required constant vigilance, and humanity had learned that lesson well. Morrison stood on the observation deck of Nexus Prime, looking out at the stars that had once seemed so threatening. Human ships patrolled the space lanes, protecting trade convoys and responding to distress calls from any species that needed help. The red alert that had once warned of human warships approaching now served as a promise of protection for the innocent. Roberts joined him at the viewport, her commander's insignia gleaming on her collar. She had become one of the most respected tactical officers in human space, her experiences at Kepler 442b having shaped her into a formidable military leader. "Do you think it will last?" she asked, watching a mixed convoy of human and alien ships pass by the station. Morrison considered the question carefully. "As long as we remember what we fought for and why it mattered. The moment we start thinking we know better than everyone else, we become what we defeated." Collins emerged from the station's engineering section, wiping his hands on a rag that had become his trademark over the years. The chief engineer had spent the past month studying council technology and determining what could be safely shared with newly independent species. "The aliens are starting to understand human engineering principles," he reported with satisfaction. "Give them a few years, and they'll be building ships that can hold their own against anything in space." That was exactly what Morrison wanted to hear. The best guarantee of galactic peace was not human dominance, but a balance of power that prevented any one species from controlling the others. Earth's children would stand guard against tyranny, but they would not rule over those they protected. As the three friends watched the busy traffic of free commerce flowing past the station, Morrison reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple decision to help strangers in distress, and it had ended with the liberation of an entire galaxy. The red alert that had once struck fear into alien hearts now carried a different message to the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, humans stood ready to defend freedom wherever it was threatened, and that was exactly how they wanted to be remembered.